It was a regular Tuesday morning around 7 a.m. back in the fall of 2018. I was on my usual bus to work, winding through the gray streets of my city. It's one of those mid-sized places, not too big, not too small, with that familiar chill in the air that morning. You know, the kind that makes you tug your coat a little tighter. The bus was old, with faded blue seats and scratched up windows. There was this faint diesel smell that clung to everything, no matter how many times they cleaned it. There weren't many people on board, maybe 6 or 7 of us, scattered across the rows. Most folks were half asleep or glued to their phones, lost in their own little worlds. I was near the back, tucked against the window, scrolling through my social media feed, trying to wake myself up from the early start. Just another day, you know? Then, at one stop, near some tired-looking office buildings, the doors hissed open. I didn't look up at first, just heard the shuffle of feet, the creak of the floor. Someone got on. I kept scrolling, but I don't know, something about the way the air shifted made me glance over. He was rough looking, greasy, matted hair poking out from under a worn cap. His clothes were dirty, and there was this sour smell, like old sweat mixed with something sharp and chemical. He moved slowly down the aisle, his boots scuffing the floor. The bus was practically empty, rows and rows of open seats, but he didn't stop at any of them. He kept coming until he dropped into the seat right next to me. My stomach twisted. Why me? Why here? I shifted closer to the window, my shoulder pressing against the cold glass. I stared at my phone, pretending I didn't notice him, but I could feel him there, like this heavy, suffocating weight in the air. At first, it was just uncomfortable. The bus lurched forward, and I kept my eyes on my screen, scrolling past random posts and work emails I wasn't even reading. But then I heard his breathing. Slow, heavy, almost deliberate. It was too close, too loud in the quiet of the bus. I stole a quick glance and saw his hands, hidden under his jacket, moving in his lap. At first, I thought he was just fidgeting or something, but the movement, it was too steady, too intentional. My chest tightened. I realized what he was doing. He was touching himself, right there, next to me. My skin crawled and I wanted to move, to scream, to do anything, but I just froze. My body wouldn't listen. I was stuck, trapped between the window and him. The bus kept rattling along, the other passengers too far away or too caught up in their own lives to notice. His smell was stronger now, that sour, acrid stench filling the space between us. It was hard to breathe. I kept staring at my phone, but I could feel his eyes on me like a spotlight I couldn't escape. Then he spoke. His voice was low, raspy, like gravel. "You're one of those girls, aren't you?" he whispered. I didn't look at him, didn't answer, but my heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. He kept talking, his words slurring into this sickening murmur. "The kind who walks the streets at night, selling yourself," he went on, saying things I can't even bring myself to repeat. Twisted, disgusting things. His hand kept moving under his jacket, faster now, matching the rhythm of his voice. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the seat, but I was trapped, paralyzed by shock and fear. I don't know how long it lasted. A minute? 5? Time just stretched, each second dragging on forever. The bus's lights flickered, casting harsh shadows across him. The hum of the engine, the squeak of the brakes, the faint traffic outside. It all blurred into this dull roar in my ears. All I could hear was his breathing, his voice, and the soft rustle of his jacket. I kept hoping someone would notice, that the driver would look back or another passenger would say something, but no one did. It was just me and him, stuck in that awful moment. Then suddenly he stopped talking. The bus slowed for the next stop and I heard the zipper of his jacket as he stood up. I kept my eyes locked on my phone, gripping it so tight my knuckles were white, praying he'd just leave. He paused, standing over me for a second, and then he leaned in close. "See you around, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with this sick familiarity. I caught a glimpse of his face as he turned, a crooked, yellowed smile that made my blood run cold. Then he shuffled off the bus and the doors hissed shut. I sat there shaking, my breath coming in short, shaky gasps. The bus pulled away, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, replaying every second, every word, every movement. At the next stop, I stumbled off, my legs barely holding me up. I called in sick to work and went straight home. I locked myself in my apartment and spent the rest of the day trying to shake the feeling that he was still out there somewhere, waiting. It was just after midnight, 12:15 a.m., on a freezing November night in 2022. I was on the SEPTA bus, Route 4, rolling down North Broad Street in Philly. The city was so quiet, with shuttered storefronts and the occasional neon sign glowing in the dark. The bus was one of those old ones. Cracked vinyl seats, overhead lights flickering like they were about to give up. I was the only passenger, slouched near the back, staring at my own tired reflection in the dark window. I'd just finished a long shift at the diner, my feet aching, my mind begging for home and my bed. All I wanted was to crash and forget the day. The bus swayed gently, the driver's silhouette barely visible up front, his radio spitting static. Every few minutes, the turn signal lights clicked, sharp and rhythmic, slicing through the silence. We stopped at empty corners, the doors hissing open to let in a blast of cold air, but no one got on. I was starting to drift, my eyes half closed, when the bus slowed at a stop near Temple University. I looked up as a man stepped on. He was tall, wrapped in a dark jacket, a black backpack slung over one shoulder. His face was half hidden under a hood, but I caught the glint of his eyes in the flickering light. They were sharp, like he was sizing up the bus. I figured he'd grab one of the dozens of empty seats up front, but he didn't. He moved down the aisle, his boots thudding, and dropped into the seat right across from me. I shifted, pulling my bag tighter against me, and tried to focus on the window, but I could feel him there like a shadow creeping closer. The air felt heavier, carrying a faint, musky smell, like unwashed clothes or something metallic. I kept my eyes on the glass, watching the city blur by, but I could see his movements out of the corner of my eye. He was still, his hands resting on that backpack in his lap. The engine's rumble seemed louder now, or maybe it was my pulse pounding in my ears. The turn signal clicked again, sharp, like a clock ticking down. A few stops went by, maybe 3 or 4, each one feeling longer than the last. I kept telling myself he was just another late-night rider, probably harmless, but the hairs on my neck wouldn't lie flat. Then I heard it, a soft zip like fabric tearing. My eyes flicked over before I could stop them. His backpack was open and his hand was inside, moving slowly, deliberately. I thought he might be grabbing a phone or a wallet, but the way he moved, the way his shoulders hunched, made my skin crawl. I looked away, my breath shallow, praying my stop was next. Then it happened. In one quick motion, like a snake striking, he pulled something from the bag, a meat cleaver, its blade catching the flickering light with a dull silver gleam. Before I could react, he lunged across the aisle, the cleaver slashing toward me. I threw myself back, my arm up to protect myself, and felt a searing pain as the blade grazed my forearm. The bus's lights flickered, throwing wild shadows, and for a split second, I saw his face, eyes wide, unblinking, a twisted grin splitting his features. The cabin exploded into chaos, my scream lost in the screech of brakes as the driver slammed to a stop. I scrambled to my feet, blood dripping down my arm, warm and sticky. He stood there, cleaver still in hand, his chest heaving like he was feeding off the moment. I stumbled toward the door, my bag forgotten, my vision blurring with panic. The driver was shouting, his voice muffled through the pounding in my head. I hit the stop button, and the doors hissed open. I tumbled onto the sidewalk, the cold pavement biting my knees. Behind me, the driver was yelling into his radio, words like attack and 911 cutting through the night. I collapsed against a street lamp, clutching my arm, blood soaking through my sleeve. The bus's taillights glowed red as it idled, the driver still on the radio. I didn't see the man get off, didn't hear him follow, but I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes. Police and an ambulance showed up, their lights painting the street blue and red. They patched me up, took my statement, but the man was gone, vanished into the city like he was never there. I don't ride the late bus anymore. Even now, months later, I wake up some nights, heart racing, feeling that blade against my skin. I don't know who he was or why he picked me. The cops never found him, and the case is still open. Every time I pass a SEPTA bus, I look at the windows, half expecting to see that grin staring back. Some part of me wonders if he's still out there, riding another route, waiting for the next empty seat. It was late at night, sometime in the spring of 2019, on a city bus winding through the outskirts of a mid-sized urban sprawl. I don't know the exact time, but it was well past midnight, when the streets are so quiet you only see the occasional streetlight casting long, lonely shadows. The air on the bus smelled like stale coffee and something faintly sour, like the echo of too many passengers. I was sitting toward the back, alone, my hoodie pulled up, staring out at the dark buildings drifting by. The only sounds were the low growl of the engine and the occasional squeak of the brakes. I'd been working late at a call center, my brain foggy from hours of fake cheer. All I could think about was getting home, maybe warming up some leftovers before collapsing into bed. The bus was empty, except for me and the driver. I felt okay, or at least as okay as you can on a late night route. That is, until the bus slowed at a stop near a dimly lit strip mall, the kind with half the signs burned out. The doors hissed open, and I heard the uneven shuffle of someone climbing aboard. I glanced over and saw a man, maybe in his 40s, slumping into the seat right beside me. My heart dropped. The bus was a ghost town of empty seats. Why here? He looked rough, his jacket stained with something dark. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around like he couldn't settle, and his hands twitched in his lap, clutching a crumpled paper bag. I shifted closer to the window, pulling my bag onto my lap like it could protect me, and tried to focus on the glass. But I could feel him there, his presence heavy like it was crowding me out. He was muttering under his breath, words I couldn't quite catch, but that had a sharp, ugly edge. I heard bits, slurs, curses, something about people like you. I told myself he was just drunk, just another lost soul on a late-night bus. If I ignored him, he'd leave me alone. But the smell of alcohol was thick now, mixing with the bus's stale air, making it hard to breathe. The engine's rumble seemed to fade, swallowed by the thud of my pulse. A few stops passed, each one stretching on forever. I kept my eyes on the window, watching my reflection flicker against the dark, but his muttering grew louder, more jagged, his body shifting like he was restless. I clutched the stop request cord, my fingers slick with sweat, counting the blocks to my street. When my stop finally came, I pulled the cord, the bell ringing sharp in the silence. I stood, my legs wobbly, and started toward the rear door. But then he moved, lurching to his feet and stumbling toward the front, his paper bag crinkling in his hand. I froze, watching him sway down the aisle, his boots scuffing the floor. He leaned in close to the driver, muttering something I couldn't hear, his voice low and slurred. The driver's face tightened, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Then, to my relief, the front door hissed open, and the man staggered out, disappearing into the dark. I let out a breath, thinking it was over, and stepped toward the rear door, expecting it to open. But it didn't. The bus lurched forward, pulling away from my stop, and I stumbled, grabbing a pole to steady myself. "Hey!" I called out. "That was my stop!" I moved toward the front, my voice shaky. The driver didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the road, his hands tight on the wheel. "You need to stay on," he said, his voice low, almost heavy. "I couldn't in good conscience let you off at the same stop as that guy." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" I asked, but he just shook his head. "It's because of what he said," he muttered, barely loud enough to hear over the engine. I pressed him, my voice getting louder, but he wouldn't say more, just told me to sit down and wait for the transit terminal. I sank into a seat near the front, my mind spinning. What had the man said? The driver's words echoed, each one sinking deeper. The bus felt colder, the fluorescent lights harsher, casting long shadows across. I kept replaying the man's muttering, his bloodshot eyes, the way he'd leaned into the driver like he was sharing something dark. My stop was long gone, and I was stuck, trapped on this bus, with no idea what kind of danger I'd just escaped. When we reached the terminal, the driver radioed for security and told me to catch a connecting bus home. I did, my hands trembling as I boarded, my eyes scanning every passenger. Later that night, I heard from a friend who worked for the transit authority that security had been sent to patrol my original stop. They didn't catch anyone, but the driver's report mentioned a threat, something too vague to act on, but serious enough to rattle him. I never found out what the man whispered, and maybe that's what haunts me most, the not knowing. It was just after midnight, sometime in the spring of 2019, on Metro's Route 81 bus cutting through downtown Los Angeles. The city was alive but quiet, with neon signs flickering over empty sidewalks and the distant hum of traffic fading into the night. The bus was one of those gritty urban ones, with worn seats that had questionable stains, windows scratched and hazy, and a faint smell of exhaust lingering in the air. I was one of only two passengers, sitting halfway back, my backpack tucked between my knees, staring out at the blur of streetlights. The other guy was a quiet man in a hoodie, just a few rows ahead. I'd been at a friend's place, lost track of time, and missed the earlier bus. Now, I was just trying to stay awake, the rhythm of the bus's sway almost pulling me under. The driver, a stocky guy with a tired look, kept his eyes on the road, the glow of his dashboard casting shadows across his face. The only sounds were the engine's low growl and the occasional click of the turn signal, sharp against the silence. We pulled up to a stop near Figueroa Street, the doors hissing open, and I barely noticed. Then I looked up as a man stepped onto the bus. He was tall, wiry, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His movements were jerky, like he was buzzing with something, and he had a duffel bag slung across his chest. He didn't sit. Instead, he strode straight to the front, leaned over the driver, and pulled something from his jacket. My heart stopped. It was a gun, its barrel glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Keep driving," he barked, his voice rough. Minutes dragged on, each one feeling like forever. The gunman paced the aisle, his gun swinging loosely in his hand, muttering to himself. I kept my eyes on the floor, on the scuffed linoleum speckled with dirt, praying he wouldn't see me. The other passenger was rigid, his hands gripping the seat in front of him, his breathing ragged. Outside, the city blurred by, but inside we were trapped in this rolling cage. No stops, no escape. I heard sirens in the distance, faint at first, then louder, closing in. The gunman heard them too. His head snapped toward the window and his muttering turned to a snarl. Then it happened. The guy in the hoodie shifted, maybe to look outside, maybe to stand. I don't know. The gunman spun around, his gun raised, and before I could blink, a deafening crack split the air. The man in the hoodie slumped forward, a dark stain spreading across his chest, his breath gurgling into silence. I bit back a scream, my hands shaking as I pressed myself against the window, the cold glass biting into my cheek. The gunman didn't even glance at him again, just turned back to the driver, shouting, "Go! Go!" The bus swerved, tires screeching, and I felt a jolt, like we'd hit something under the wheels. The bus shuddered to a halt, its frame groaning like it was wounded. The sirens were deafening now, red and blue lights flashing through the windows, painting the cabin in frantic pulses. The gunman was screaming, his voice raw, waving the gun wildly. I crouched low, my knees pressed into the seat, my hands over my head, waiting for another shot that never came. Then a sudden bang. Not a gunshot, but a flashbang, its light blinding, its sound rattling my skull. The air filled with smoke, sharp and acrid, and I heard boots storming the bus, voices shouting, "Down! Down!" I stayed frozen, eyes stinging, until a gloved hand grabbed my arm and pulled me out, past the gunman's crumpled form, now pinned to the floor. I stumbled onto the street, gasping, the night air cold against my sweat-soaked skin. Paramedics swarmed, their radios crackling, but I couldn't focus. The other passenger was gone, pronounced dead at the scene, his face burned into my mind. The driver was okay, shaken but alive, and the gunman was in cuffs, his cap knocked off, revealing a gaunt, hollow face. SWAT officers milled around, their flashlights cutting through the dark, but I just sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the bus's open doors. The inside was a mess, blood on the seats, glass shattered, a nightmare frozen in time. I don't take the bus anymore, not after that night. The news said the gunman was arrested, charged with murder and a long list of other crimes, but they never said why he did it. Was he high? Desperate? Just broken? I don't know, and maybe I don't want to. Every time I hear sirens or see a metro bus, I'm back in that seat, hearing that gunshot, seeing that man slump forward. I survived, but part of me is still on Route 81, trapped in that hour-long chase, wondering if I'll ever feel safe again.